The museum ship Irene drifted silently in the void, a relic itself, half starcraft, half archive. Its corridors hummed faintly with power, the muted glow of holographic displays casting eerie blue shadows across its steel bones. Here, among the relics of countless lost wars, an alien war veteran prepared to reveal a secret buried deep beneath layers of history. Coral Thenvas was an imposing figure even in retirement. His exoskeleton was scarred, a map of battles etched into every ridge and ridgelet of his chitin. His mandibles twitched as he adjusted the recording interface strapped to his chest. Across from him sat the historian, an earnest young Arquin named Lyra, her eyes wide with anticipation. The dim light caught the glint in Coral's multifaceted eyes as he began. His voice was gravelly, thick with memories few wanted to hear. "You think you know war," he said, his tone low and biting. "But you don't. Not until you fought humans." Lyra's pen hovered over her datapad, waiting. The galaxy, at large, had always dismissed humanity as a fringe species, reckless, underdeveloped, hardly worthy of the grand strategies practiced by the galactic powers. Yet Coral's words hinted at something else, something darker and fiercer than any recorded history. Coral inhaled, his voice dropping even lower. "When we first encountered them near Alpha Centauri, we thought them primitive. Scattered colonies, no grand fleets, barely a foothold in space. We expected a swift conquest. What we got was a firestorm." The veteran's memories stirred like a storm in his mind. "Our patrol convoy, 6 cruisers, a dozen frigates, was moving through the system routine scouting. Suddenly their ships appeared, small, ragged, and moving like animals cornered." He shook his head. "No formation, no fleet maneuvers, just chaos." A hologram flickered to life between them, displaying a 3D map of the battle. Explosions dotted the void, ships darting erratically as beams of plasma streaked across the darkness. Coral's voice narrated over the visual, sharp and precise. They used ambush tactics no other species had seen, suicide drones barreling straight into our shields, then disappearing into swarms of fighters. Electronic pulses that scrambled, our targeting systems turning our own AIs against us. And worst of all, they fought with a desperation that defied logic. Lyra glanced up, breath caught. But their weapons, weren't they inferior? Coral gave a slow, bitter laugh. Inferior, maybe in tech, but their will? That was unmatched. They sacrificed everything without hesitation. One pilot, a human, rammed his ship into my wing cruiser when we were closing in, destroying himself to buy his comrades time. They fought not with order, but with raw, unchained fury. His voice grew hard, sharp with old pain. "We lost half our convoy that day. It wasn't just a battle, it was a lesson, and we weren't ready to learn." The silence between them thickened. The museum ship seemed to hold its breath, as if the ghosts of the past hung in the air. Lyra could feel it too. This was more than a story about war. It was a reckoning. Coral's gaze drifted toward the viewport, where distant stars twinkled, cold and indifferent. "They don't tell you this in the archives," he muttered. "How humans don't just fight battles. They remake them. How their tactics are unpredictable, brutal, and above all, alive." The veteran leaned forward, eyes burning with a fierce glow. "I have seen their rage. I have felt their cunning, and I have come to understand something terrifying. Humanity doesn't play by the rules of war the rest of us wrote." Lyra swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" He paused, searching for the right words. "They turn survival into art. They improvise with broken weapons, rewrite strategies on the fly, use the environment as a weapon, and, when all else fails, they throw themselves into the fight like wild beasts, refusing to back down." Coral's mandibles flexed in a grim smile. "I was there when the galaxy learned the truth. Humanity is not a force to be controlled. They are a force to be feared." Lyra's recorder blinked steadily, capturing every word. The historian knew this interview would change everything. This was the first time a Zarnathi veteran had spoken openly of humanity's war tactics, and what he revealed was not just military history, it was a warning. The veteran's eyes locked onto hers, piercing and unyielding. You want to understand what it means to fight humans? Remember this. They don't just wage war, they survive by turning the impossible into inevitable. And once they set their will on something, no power in the stars can stop them. Theory, museum ship's lights dimmed further, shadows swallowing the room as Coral Thenva sat back, silent but alive with the fire of memories. Across the void, humanity's fierce battle tactics awaited to be unveiled, and the galaxy would never look at them the same again. The stars beyond the viewport seemed to pulse in rhythm with Coral Thenva's recounting, a cosmic heartbeat, drumming with memories of blood and fire. The veteran's voice took on a sharper edge, cold and clipped, as he described the unfolding disaster near Alpha Centauri. Our convoy had been patrolling the system for weeks, expecting nothing more than routine scans and minor skirmishes with space pirates. Coral said, humans were not supposed to be a threat. Their colonies were scattered, weak, their fleets laughable. Yet when they struck, it was like the void itself ignited. The holographic battle map flared to life once again, this time zooming in on a chaotic cluster of ships trapped near a nebula's edge. Coral's claw traced erratic lines as he spoke. The humans didn't fight like we did. No rigid formations, no disciplined volleys. Instead, they scattered, swarming like insects, each ship a wild card. A sudden explosion rocked the hologram, shards of debris tumbling through the digital void. Coral's eyes narrowed. Their fighters darted in and out, hiding among asteroid fields and debris, using the environment like a weapon. Their weapons? Primitive, yes, but effective in ways we couldn't anticipate. Lyra leaned forward, captivated. How did they manage to outmaneuver an entire fleet? Coral's mandibles flexed thoughtfully. They used every tool at their disposal, even the wreckage of their own destroyed ships. They sent out swarms of small expendable drones, sometimes no bigger than a hatchling, that latched onto our hulls, detonating with terrifying precision. The veteran's tone darkened as he described one particular moment. One of their suicide drones breached the shield of my flagship. The explosion tore through the outer armor like paper. The chaos was sudden and absolute. His eyes flashed as he recalled the pilot who made the difference. It was a human, a fighter pilot named Jax Harper, or so I later learned. When we closed in on his ship, he didn't flee. Instead, he rammed his vessel directly into my wing, cruiser. The collision shattered his ship and crippled ours, but it bought his fleet precious seconds to regroup. Coral's voice grew grim. That act was not desperation. It was defiance, a statement. They fought with a fury I had never witnessed. Fury, born from something deeper than strategy or survival. It was raw, animalistic will. The veteran paused, the weight of memory settling over him like a shadow. Our fleet was caught off guard. We lost 3 cruisers, 5 frigates, and countless fighters. What should have been a quick and decisive victory turned into a bloody retreat. Lyra's eyes shimmered with disbelief. But how did the humans coordinate such chaos? It sounds anarchic. Coral smiled wryly. That's what made it so terrifying. They didn't follow our doctrine. They thrived in the chaos, adapting on the fly. Their commanders didn't issue orders the way ours did. Instead, they trusted their instincts and their comrades. He tapped a datapad on the table, bringing up intercepted comms. The faint crackle of static filled the room before broken human voices emerged, shouting rapid commands, laughter, and even cries of pain. An unfiltered human battle soundtrack. Listen to that, Coral said softly. No rigid discipline, just raw humanity screaming through the void. That chaos was their strength. The historian shivered. It sounds almost reckless. Coral's eyes gleamed with bitter respect. Reckless, yes, but it worked, and it terrified us. He leaned back, his gaze distant. For the first time, I understood something fundamental. These creatures fought not just with weapons, but with their hearts. Every loss was personal. Every victory a reason to keep fighting. The veteran's mandibles clicked in reflection. We realized that no matter how many ships we destroyed, no matter how many pilots we shot down, humanity would keep coming. Ruthless, relentless. Lyra swallowed, struck by the enormity of the revelation. What happened next? Coral's voice hardened. We regrouped, tried to impose order, but the firestorm had already started. Humanity was no longer just a species to conquer. They had become a force of nature. The lights flickered briefly, the Irene creaking as if echoing his words. Coral's voice dropped to a whisper. And that was only the beginning. The room fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship. The historian's fingers flew over her datapad, desperate to capture every detail. Across the stars, a war was raging. A war where humanity's fierce battle tactics were rewriting the rules of conflict. Coral fixed Lyra with a piercing gaze. If you want to understand what it truly means to fight humans, remember this. They don't just survive the firestorm, they become it. The cold hum of the Irene seemed to pulse in time with Coral Thenvas's memories. The veteran's voice carrying the weight of battles fought not just in space but beneath the dirt and foliage of alien worlds. The hologram shifted to a dark, forested planet, Tarsus III, where the war had taken on a new, brutal form. This was supposed to be a simple ground operation, Coral began, the creak of his exoskeleton audible as he leaned forward. Our fleet had crippled their orbital defenses. We thought their planetary forces would crumble. Instead, we walked into a nightmare. The display zoomed in on tangled forests and jagged mountain ranges. Coral's claw traced a twisting path through dense underbrush and caverns that seemed to swallow light itself. Tarsus III was a labyrinth. Humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like shadows. He paused, mandibles twitching. They used the land against us, turning every rock, every tree into a weapon. Coral's voice lowered as he described the initial advance of his elite infantry. Our forces were trained for precision strikes, blitzkrieg tactics, overwhelming firepower. But these humans? They disappeared into the forest as if they were part of them. The veteran's gaze darkened. They laid sonic mines that mimicked forest sounds, tricking our sensors. They created illusions, holograms of soldiers, that vanished when we tried to fire. Their ambushes were timed perfectly, hitting our flanks while disappearing like ghosts. The hologram flickered, showing a squad trapped in a canyon. One of our units disappeared entirely. No bodies, no distress calls. We sent search teams, only to find the squad's weapons arranged neatly in a circle, a mockery of surrender. Coral's voice was tight. It was a trick. The humans faked their deaths, waited for us to relax, then sprang the trap. We lost half that search party to crossfire before retreating. Lyra's eyes widened. How did your soldiers respond? Coral shook his head slowly. With confusion and fear. Nothing in our training prepared us for this kind of war. The forests felt alive, watching. Our soldiers started doubting what was real. He rubbed a scar near his eye. There was one human infantry unit we captured. Or so we thought. When we interrogated them, they seemed calm, almost amused. But that night they vanished from their cells. The next morning, several of our guards were found dead, arranged in grotesque patterns. The historian swallowed, sensing the fear behind the veteran's calm words. They fought with madness, Coral said, but it was a calculated madness. Every move was designed to unnerve, to break our will. He paused, voice heavy with respect. One soldier I saw, barely a child by our standards, had rigged explosives inside a hollow tree, timed to detonate just as we marched by. He smiled when we caught him. The hologram shifted to the aftermath. Smoldering ruins, shattered, trees, bodies strewn among broken branches. They weren't just fighting for territory, Coral continued. They were fighting for their survival, for their families, for their home. The veteran's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. I saw something else that day, a different kind of strength. He recounted a moment when a human medic ran into a hail of gunfire to drag a wounded alien soldier to safety. That act broke something inside me, Coral admitted quietly. They fought like wild beasts, but they also held on to their humanity. Even in war. Lyra's pen hovered as she processed the contradiction. A race both terrifying and profoundly human. Coral's eyes gleamed in the dim light. That's when I realized the true nature of the enemy. Not just fighters, but survivors. Masters of deception, resilience, and sacrifice. The Irene shifted slightly, as if sensing the weight of the revelation. Coral leaned back, voice heavy with finality. We left Tarsus III defeated, not by weapons but by a maze of shadows. A war fought not just on the battlefield but in minds and hearts. The historian's voice broke the silence. How did the rest of the galaxy respond? Coral's gaze hardened. They ignored it, thought it a quirk of a fringe species. But I knew better. I knew humanity would change the rules of war forever. He looked toward the stars beyond the viewport, a flicker of something like awe in his eyes. Because when humans fight, he said softly, they don't just survive the maze, they become its masters. The cold hum of the Irene seemed to thicken as Coral Thenva shifted in his seat. His eyes, dark and multifaceted, locked onto the historian's eager gaze. If you think the battlefield is the only place humans fight, he began, voice low and serious, you've only glimpsed half the war. The hologram flickered, displaying a vast web of communications, channels, frequencies, and encrypted signals spanning light years. Humans mastered war beyond weapons. They weaponized fear and doubt. Coral recounted the early stages of the psychological campaign. Broadcasts hijacking Zarnathi communication lines with false information, fabricated orders, and even distorted broadcasts of victory celebrations in enemy dialects. They didn't just hack our systems, they infiltrated our minds, he said, a shadow crossing his expression. We would receive orders to retreat or redeploy, only to find those orders came from human operatives posing as our commanders. A faint hologram emerged, showing a digital representation of a Zarnathi command bridge disrupted by false commands. Entire fleets changed course mid-battle, falling into ambushes because of human deception. Our officers doubted their own senses. Our soldiers began to wonder if their leaders were even real. Lyra leaned forward, captivated. Did they use propaganda too? Coral nodded sharply. Yes, they broadcast messages in our own language, sowing dissent, mistrust, and fear. They played on our cultures, exploiting old grudges and fears. Some units even mutinied, unsure if they were fighting the enemy or their own comrades. He paused, the weight of memories settling on him. It was subtle, insidious. We fought, shadows unsure what was real. The veteran's mandibles clicked in irritation. There was one operation, the Whisper Veil, where human agents posed as refugees, infiltrating our ranks. They spread lies that our leaders had betrayed us, that the war was lost. Our morale collapsed in certain sectors faster than any weapon could destroy. Lyra's fingers danced over her datapad. How did your commanders respond? Coral's voice grew colder. They tried to tighten security, but humans always found new ways in. Their agents were masters of disguise. Imposters who could mimic our voices, mannerisms, even neural signatures. He shook his head. Trust became the rarest commodity. The fear of betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Coral's gaze darkened further as he described how humans turned prisoners of war into tools of psychological warfare. Captured Zarnathi soldiers were coerced into broadcasting false surrender messages to their own troops, leading entire units into traps. We called it the echo of despair. Hearing a trusted voice command retreat, only to realize it was a lie, shattered many minds. The veteran's voice faltered for a moment as he remembered a particular case. One of my closest comrades was captured and forced to send false orders. The guilt broke him. When we finally rescued him, he was a shell. Lyra's eyes glistened with empathy. That must have been devastating. It was, Coral admitted. It made us question everything. Not just strategy, but reality. Who was friend? Who was foe? We started trusting no one, not even our own shadows. The hologram shifted to a scene of a Zarnathi fleet in disarray, overwhelmed by confusion and fear. But the most terrifying part, Coral said, was how humans controlled this chaos. They fed our fears, then stepped back, watching us unravel. His eyes gleamed with reluctant respect. They fought with their minds as fiercely as with their weapons. Their battlefield was not just space or ground, it was the psyche of the enemy. The historian remained silent for a long moment, absorbing the scope of the mental warfare. Coral leaned forward again, his voice steady and grave. You asked me why we feared humans. It was because they didn't just break our ships or kill our soldiers, they broke our will to fight. He straightened, the veteran's scars catching the dim light. This war was no longer about territory or resources. It was about survival of the mind, spirit, and heart. The room felt heavier as Coral's words settled over the listener. If you ever face humanity in war, he warned, prepare not just for their weapons but for the war inside your own mind. The Irene shuddered softly, as if echoing the silent storm raging beyond its walls. Humanity's fierce battle. Tactics were no longer just a legend. They were a nightmare born from cunning, resilience, and the relentless refusal to surrender. Coral then Voss rubbed the worn scars on his exoskeleton, each a testament to close calls and brutal combat. If you thought we had seen the worst on the battlefield, he said, voice low and grim, you haven't met the humans face to face. The when hologram flickered, zooming in on a massive space station orbiting a shattered planet, Vraxis Prime. This was the scene of the humans' most audacious operation yet, a desperate strike meant to turn the tide. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and outclassed, Coral recounted, but what humans lacked in firepower they made up with unpredictability. The digital battle unfolded with frantic energy. Human ships zipped through asteroid belts, weaving unpredictably, weaving through narrow spaces no Zarnathi pilot would dare enter. Coral's claw moved quickly over the map, tracing impossible flight paths. They employed what we called the human factor. Tactics so chaotic and unconventional they defied all known logic. They used the environment like extensions of their weapons. Asteroids became shields, debris fields, traps. Coral paused, voice thickening. During the assault on Vraxis Prime, human pilots made suicide runs into our command nodes, sacrificing themselves to cripple our coordination. When our fleet tried to regroup, they launched false distress calls in our language, leading entire squadrons into kill zones. Lyra's breath caught. How did your commanders react? Coral's eyes gleamed with a mix of respect and bitterness. With frustration and desperation. They started calling the humans wild cards. No strategy, no plan, just raw instinct and chaos. He shook his head. But chaos was their weapon, and it worked. The veteran recalled one particular pilot, Admiral Naomi Cray, a name whispered in dread across Zarnathi command centers. She led a squadron that, against all odds, destroyed 3 of our capital ships with only a handful of fighters. She coordinated attacks with a split-second timing no AI could predict. Coral's mandibles twitched as he remembered the moment they finally captured her. Briefly. She smiled when we imprisoned her. Said, you think you understand war, you don't. Not until you've faced what drives us. The hologram shifted to a dimly lit cell, where a human woman with sharp eyes and a confident smile stood, defiant. Coral's voice softened, a flicker of admiration piercing his usual bitterness. She was fierce, clever, and unbreakable. Lyra noted the change. What drove her? What drove humanity? Coral's eyes narrowed. Survival. But more than that, hope, a stubborn refusal to lose. They fought not just for themselves, but for something greater. Family, freedom, the right to carve their own destiny. The veteran's gaze grew distant. Humans turned desperation into strength. They embraced sacrifice like a rite of passage. Every loss fueled their rage. Every victory hardened their resolve. He tapped a button, and the hologram showed a human pilot's last stand, surrounded, outnumbered, fighting fiercely until the final moment. They don't fight to survive. They fight to win, no matter the cost. Coral's voice dropped to a whisper. That is the human factor. The room fell silent. The galaxy might have dismissed humanity once, but Coral's words revealed a truth too fierce to ignore. Lyra closed her datapad, eyes shining. And you? What did you learn from facing them? The veteran leaned forward, mandibles twitching thoughtfully. That war is not about rules or honor. It's about will. And humans, their will is a wildfire that no force in the universe can contain. The cold metal walls of the Irene's briefing room seemed to close in around Coral Thenvas as he stared at the holographic image of Admiral Naomi Cray. The human leader's sharp eyes and unwavering confidence burned through the projection like a challenge. This was no ordinary prisoner, Coral said, his voice low and charged with unspoken respect. Naomi Cray wasn't just a pilot or commander. She was a force of nature. He leaned forward, mandibles twitching. Our forces caught her during the Battle of Vraxis Prime, after she led a daring raid that crippled our flagship. We thought capturing her would break the human resistance. We were wrong. The hologram shifted to the chaotic battlefield. A blurred flash of explosions, fighters darting, and then Naomi's ship, battered but unyielding, spiraling toward capture. Coral's gaze darkened. She was brought to us, alone, unarmed. We expected submission or fear. Instead, she smiled. He recounted the first interrogation. Our best minds tried everything: threats, persuasion, lies. She looked us in the eye and said, "You don't understand us. You never will." The veteran's voice was a growl. She turned the tables. Instead of breaking, she questioned us, mocked our strategy, pointed out our weaknesses. Lyra's eyes narrowed. How did that affect you? Coral hesitated, then said quietly, "It shook me." She spoke of humanity's strength, not in weapons but in spirit, of the will to endure, to fight when all seems lost. He recalled their longest session together. She spoke of her home, of a world battered by war but unbowed, of people who'd faced extinction and still found reasons to rise. The hologram shifted to a brief flashback, a small, shattered city under siege, children running through ruins. Her words cut deeper than any blade, Coral admitted. For the first time I saw the war not as conquest, but as a test of spirit. Their dialogue became a duel, a battle of minds and wills. She said, "You see us as wild animals, unpredictable and reckless, but that's your fear talking. We are survivors. We fight with heart, because we have to." Coral's claws tapped thoughtfully on the table. That made me realize something crucial. The humans didn't just fight against us. They fought for something. Their rage, their chaos, it was born of love, loss, and hope. The veteran sighed. That encounter changed me, not into a friend, but into a wary opponent. I understood why our fleets failed, why our tactics crumbled. Lyra looked up, fascinated. Did she ever show weakness? Coral's mandibles twitched, in a dry smile. No, if anything, her strength came from her vulnerabilities, her refusal to let fear rule her. He leaned back, voice heavy. We released her, hoping she would falter, but instead she returned to her people, stronger than before, a symbol of defiance and hope. The hologram faded, leaving only the weight of memory. Coral's eyes met, Lyra's, solemn and steady. That was the turning point. Humanity was not a foe to be conquered. They were a storm to be endured. The historian nodded slowly, absorbing the truth of two warriors bound by war yet divided by destiny. From that day, Coral concluded, I fought not just against humans, but alongside the respect they earned through fire and sacrifice. The scout. Irene creaked softly, the silence filled with unspoken understanding. Two species locked in a clash not only of weapons, but of wills and hearts. The Irene's dim lights cast long shadows across the briefing room as Coral Thenvas paused, the weight of years etched into his posture. The veteran's voice was quieter now, as if the memories themselves bore scars deeper than flesh and armor. After countless battles, losses, and near defeats, the war fractured us, Coral said. Our fleets were stretched thin, and the unity we once had began to crack. The hologram shifted to scenes of shattered ships drifting in cold voids, ravaged battlefields strewn with debris, and soldiers haunted by exhaustion and grief. Many of our commanders wanted to escalate, to crush humanity with overwhelming force, Coral continued. Others believed it was time to seek peace. Lyra's eyes searched the veteran's face. What stopped the escalation? Coral's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The humans. Their resilience was unlike anything we expected. No matter how many ships we destroyed, how many soldiers we captured or killed, they rebuilt, adapted, and fought back harder. He tapped a data pad, revealing intercepted human broadcasts filled with messages of hope, defiance, and calls to unity. Their leaders spoke of peace, but their fighters knew no surrender. The veteran's voice held a note of irony. Both sides were trapped in a cycle, each attack breeding more hatred, each loss hardening resolve. Coral's gaze hardened. Yet even amid the flames of war, moments of humanity flickered. He told of a ceasefire on the remote world of Rylan 9, where weary soldiers from both sides were forced to share shelter during a brutal storm. In the freezing darkness, enemies huddled together not out of trust but necessity, Coral said. They shared stories, food, and wounds. For a brief moment, the war faded into the background. Lyra smiled faintly. A glimpse of what could be. Coral nodded slowly. Yes, but it was fragile. When the storm passed, the fighting resumed. Fierce and unforgiving. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. Still, that moment proved something vital. We were not so different. Beneath the armor and weapons, there was shared pain, fear, and hope. The historian's voice softened. Did that change the war? Coral sighed. Not immediately, but it planted a seed. The hologram shifted to a secret meeting between human diplomats and Zarnathi elders. Both sides began to seek dialogue. Not out of weakness, but understanding, Coral explained. They realized that endless war would destroy everything. He paused, then spoke of the fragile peace talks, tense negotiations shadowed by mistrust, sabotage, and the ghosts of battles past. There were factions on both sides who saw peace as betrayal, Coral said grimly. Saboteurs, extremists, and those who thirsted for vengeance threatened to reignite the flames. Lyra's fingers trembled slightly. How did they hold the peace together? Through courage and sacrifice, Coral said quietly. Leaders like Naomi Cray risked everything to build bridges. She fought as fiercely for peace as she did in battle. The veteran's voice grew soft, almost reverent. She believed that understanding was the ultimate weapon, the only way to end the war. Coral looked out the viewport toward the stars, shadows dancing in the cold light. War had torn us apart, he said, but hope held the promise of a future where humans and Zarnathi could stand not as enemies, but as allies. The room was silent, the enormity of his story settling like a whispered promise. Remember this, Coral said at last. Even in the darkest wars, the fiercest battles, the smallest flicker of hope can change everything. The Irene drifted, silently through the void, stars shimmering like distant beacons of promise and pain. Coral Thenva sat quietly, the weight of years pressed into every scar and line of his worn exoskeleton. He looked beyond the viewport, beyond the endless darkness to a future still uncertain. The war with humanity changed everything, Coral said softly, voice carrying the echoes of countless battles. Not just in strategy or tactics, but in how we saw ourselves and each other. He folded his claws across his chest, mandibles twitching in thought. We came to the fight believing we were the superior species, masters of war. But humans, they taught us humility. The hologram beside him shifted to images of shattered battlefields slowly reclaimed by nature, of soldiers from both sides rebuilding what was broken. They showed us that true strength is not just about firepower, but about endurance, adaptability, and above all, will. Coral's eyes darkened as he recounted the cost. Millions were lost, worlds scarred, families torn apart. But out of that devastation came a fragile peace, born not from victory but from shared exhaustion and hope. The historian across from him nodded solemnly. A peace hard won. Coral's voice grew reflective. And yet, peace is a beginning, not an end. The memories of war linger in every heart. Trust is fragile, easily shattered by fear and old wounds. He paused, his gaze distant. We must remember the lessons we learned from humans. Their fierce spirit, their refusal to surrender to despair. He tapped a scar near his eye. Naomi Cray, their fierce admiral, once told me, "War is hell, but it can also teach us what it means to live." I carry her words with me. The veteran looked back at the historian. Their tactics, their chaos, their resilience, it was not just war. It was a mirror, a harsh reflection of our own fears and hopes. The Irene systems hummed softly, a reminder of the fragile peace that held the galaxy together. Coral stood slowly, voice steady with resolve. The galaxy must remember, when humans fight, they bring more than weapons. They bring the fierce fire of survival and hope. To face them is to face not only an enemy, but the indomitable will to endure. He looked once more toward the stars, the endless sea of possibilities. Our war may be over, but its echoes will shape the future. Let those echoes remind us that peace is forged in the fire of understanding, and that even the fiercest battles can plant the seeds of tomorrow. Coral Thenvas's mandibles clicked softly, a sound of both finality and beginning.